So continue from last time. I hope everybody's having a good afternoon so far today. As always, of course, the expectation will be to have your cameras on, be fully visible in your cameras, and keep them on throughout the class for full points today. When we talk about correctional services, again, the goal is to provide the most effective treatment. And to do so, inmate needs are assessed at the classification center when they're coming in. And this treatment effectiveness is thought to be maximized by matching in with their proper treatment modality. Again, if they have some health condition or mental health issue that's really serious, they want to get that information on the front end. And proper classification is crucial to the efficient application of treatment. So again, just making sure that you get the information on the front end to make sure that the prison or the inmates don't run us any problems later on. So there is, again, it's an objective classification system. It isn't something that's arbitrarily made up, or is at the autonomy of any individual. I'll let you all get that down for a moment, and then I'll expound in a moment. As always, the lecture is being recorded. It will be posted at the end of class if there's anything that you do miss. So out of these objective classification systems, the criteria that they use in determining where to place inmates is born through, like, yes, we try to with many things, through research. This ensures also that you have well-trained professional personnel. Again, I regret that we weren't able to go into the prisons, go into a prison this term. But one of the things that you would have saw there is that you have people with a lot of different types of jobs, a lot of different specializations there. It's not just, again, correctional officers. Again, they have to have therapists, nurses, all types of different professionals to serve a given prison population, depending upon, again, what the needs of the prisoners are. You also have this central classification unit that's responsible for monitoring the classification and also making sure, because again, there will be different policies depending upon where you're classified in the prison. You may get more, the degree of range that you have oftentimes will be distinguished by your classification within the prison system. More and more of these systems are being fully automated. So that, again, meaning that, it's recorded digitally where it can be transparent and clear, for anyone to see that may come into the prison. It makes it a lot more efficient as well. And there can be overrides that will allow you to depart from the classification level. So one of the things we talked about is some overrides, for example, might be if one area of the prison is crowded, obviously it's going to be challenging to, put more people there. But you just will have to rationalize and justify that decision. So in making a classification, again, the first thing you consider is the risk assessment. And the final exam is coming up. Again, I am not sure when the final exam date is. The university will set that for us. But as you prepare for the final exam, and you know we still have not had our second quiz yet, so be ready for that. This is the kind of information that might be on the exam. And listen up, don't just write down what you see on the screen. Don't just write down what you see on the screen. What we're talking about here is in determining where to classify the prisoner. These are the criteria that are used. So the risk assessment, again, keep in mind that the first goal more than anything else, we talk about prisoners' rights, and we want to, and there are rights that have to be protected. There are certain services got to be provided. But the most important thing, the most important consideration is the security of the guards and other inmates. So the first thing you consider is the risk assessment. What is the risk of this dude with this vice lord tattoo? What is the risk of putting him in a unit heavily populated by gangster disciples? The needs assessment, again, just speaks to their medical and physical needs. Some individuals, again, we got to keep in mind the costs. There are some individuals who come into prison like that are handicapped. They have to live in a wheelchair their whole lives. They got to be in prison. You have to provide accommodations for that inmate. Making sure, again, they get proper bathing and all that type of stuff. So again, that's why I say we really want to be mindful. If this handicapped person was involved in heinous crimes, if they were a murderer or something like that, really violent criminal, the state is going to have to find a way to deal with that. If it's a less violent criminal, it might be better for the person's family to accrue those costs. Sentry was a final point on there. Sentry just speaks to monitoring that. We generally think of monitoring devices with outside of the prison, but you could be monitored within the prison as well, particularly again in more high level maximum security type prisons, where there may be some automated device where we need to know where you're at every single moment. We also, again, when we talk about services, an important service that has to be considered are various therapeutic services. And there are three categories of insight-based therapies. There are three categories of insight-based therapies that the author talked about in this chapter. There's psychotherapy where, again, to help individuals overcome, challenges with chemical mental health issues. Again, being bipolar is not something that anybody can help or just, learn their way out of it. But there are therapies that you can get to be able to manage it more effectively. Transactional analysis are a very important amount of therapy. Again, when we talk about rehabilitating individuals, where hopefully they don't commit these crimes again and again and again and again, where we see through the high recidivism rate that we spoke about last time, a large important aspect of that is getting these people, these individuals, to understand and to acknowledge the wrongdoing of their behavior. So transactional analysis involves them really taking into account in terms of okay, look, you may have come from this environment. You may have had been subjected to this level of abuse, but let's look at how your choices, your transactional choices throughout life ended up in you being here, and how can we change those once you get on the outside? And then reality therapy, again, just where getting people to be able to deal and function in the real world as it functions without engaging in deviant behaviors. The, there are some individuals that may be, particularly if they're institutionalized when they're very young, where that's all they know, where they may actually have trouble dealing with social reality. There are some limitations, like again, with any mechanism, with any health strategy, nothing is going to work perfectly. So it's important that we understand what insight-based therapies do, but we also want to look closely at their limitations as well. And some of those are broken down here. And a lot of these limitations are, quite frankly, challenges that therapists have with, individuals throughout the population. That one, inmates, like most human beings, do not see themselves as having emotional problems. Oftentimes, we perceive that if somebody is getting therapy, there's something wrong with me. What, you trying to say I'm crazy? And in some ways, yes, all of us have some levels of challenges to just try to maintain your mental health day to day. Like, we take it for granted at times, but that's not an easy thing to do. So just getting people to acknowledge that they may have some problems in the first place can be a great challenge. In similar form, people can be reluctant to share their inner thoughts. One of the things, again, so Malik, in your background in human services and criminal justice, I think that these are the type of things that you want to be attentive to. I'm not sure, again, if you want to work in a prison, and I don't knock that. Working in prison is hard work, but do know it will be an opportunity available to you, young man, in terms of that there just aren't many human service, human services are greatly understaffed within prison. They're understaffed, frankly, throughout all segments of society, but definitely within the prison. So a lot of times you just don't have enough professional mental health individuals to take part in the agency. Just 3%. And in U.S. prisons, they got to provide a range of mental health services. Again, bipolar, schizophrenia, paranoia, addictive behaviors. It's a lot. It can be very overwhelming, particularly when you consider, Latasia, that over half of all inmates, and again, do your own research on this, but over half of all inmates have some form of mental health issues. Again, keep this in mind, right? When we're talking about, locking people up and we just want to throw them, within four walls. Like I said, that just because somebody is crazy, the dude in Colorado, he, by all accounts, who shot up the grocery store, by all accounts, he has some mental health challenges. That doesn't mean that he gets to be, he's not accountable for his choices. They took him to go get a mental health reading. Then they took him to prison, where he's at now. So most people are going to go to prison. And definitely if you commit a crime like that, there's, justice needs to be served. point blank. But, again, we've seen cases like, I'm not sure if you all saw, like, there have been situations where people have had mental health issues and the police have been called to the scene and end up shooting people that were not necessarily like, threats. And it wasn't like, a lot of times it wasn't that the police were even trying to act maliciously. They genuinely didn't understand what they were seeing and observing. So we need mental health professionals to be able to be, in more and more states, again, defunding the police and all that, that's not going to happen. And it shouldn't happen. We do need good, effective police departments. We do. But we also, I think, want to do a more effective job of having the police and mental health professionals focus in areas where they can really be successful. And sending a police officer to deal with a schizophrenic, that might not necessarily be the most effective strategy. We need psychiatrists, social workers, physicians. And with that, that can hopefully curb some of the crime, save us some money on our prison population, and it'll allow the police to target, the cats that are shooting up, schools and stuff like that, or they are getting into a gang shootout and they hit some 3-year-old girl in her neck. So many of those crimes go unsolved while we're locking up people with mental health issues and drug addictions. Behavior therapy is another strategy. Because again, right, a lot of it, like we talked about with parents and punishing, the goal is to shape behavior. For many of us, for most human beings, you get punished one time when you're a little kid, you learn a lesson, and you don't do that stuff no more. You get in trouble at school and get reprimanded and your behavior is corrected. So many people are able to, again, proceed. But a lot of people, again, don't have those kind of checks and balances. Again, like, sometimes when we get strict discipline from our parents, it doesn't always feel good, but it's very helpful and beneficial. Like, in many ways, it's showing love and concern by like, look, I need to correct this behavior while you're 6 years old, while you're 10 years old, while you're 15 years old, before the state starts trying to correct it for you. And as we have seen, Malik, the state has not been very good at correcting behaviors, given our high recidivism rate. So behavior therapy is another strategy. And it just simply like you reward desired behaviors immediately, and you punish undesirable behaviors immediately, in kind immediately.
I got a question.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, so the therapy that you're gonna write in our papers, when you asked us what we thought what could be done, like is this some of the things like this right here we can use, or did you want to come up with our own personal idea?
Both. Great question. I'm glad you brought that up too. I do want to break out the paper. But both, Malik. Great. Yeah. So you definitely can. You not only can you use this, you need to use this. This is exactly the type of things we're talking about. But yes, I would love for you to go in and unearth some of your own as well. Give me 1 second. Thank you so much, sir, for bringing that back up. All right, so I'm gonna get through a little bit more of the lecture, then I'm gonna go over the assignment in more detail. So bear with me on that, but I appreciate you, Malik Lewis. Great question. And yeah, and again, look, if y'all are listening to me and look at what I'm telling y'all, a large part of the paper is already written. You got to use your critical thinking. You can't just repeat what I'm saying and throw into the paper. You can't just cut and paste your notes and put that into the paper. Please don't do me like that. So you got to put on your critical thinking hat, but yeah, the information here is pretty straightforward. So with behavior modification, you're just using, negative and positive reinforcement to encourage and extinguish undesirable behaviors. Again, the same way that the Mark system works. So you receive, the more that you adapt, the more that your behavior adapts and is modified to institutional rules, the more benefits you get in the prison. The more that you act like a fool, the less rights and privileges you get. That makes sense, right? Again, if we want to have them come in there from a minimalist point of view, the effectiveness of that can be debated. But if they're showing that they're actually displaying some levels of rehabilitation, I don't see any reason that they can't be treated like human beings. Cognitive behavior therapy is another strategy. And it's based off the premise and assumption that the foundations for criminal behavior are dysfunctional patterns of thinking. So one of the main things, for example, right, that distinguishes some particularly repeat offenders is impulsivity. All human beings, as we've talked about again from your first social science class, are born with some degrees of impulsivity, meaning that again, they're just certain natural things and instincts that particularly as it relates to excitement, that human beings may be drawn to. But the difference between most is that so it's an impulse for you to run across that street, Latasia, as a little kid. Your mama hit your hand like, hey, don't cross the street without looking. You learn that lesson. It may be an impulse to take things that don't belong to you. But your behavior is corrected by a stern lecture from your grandma. You don't do that no more. For many individuals who, again, are recidivists, it's more difficult for them to maintain or stifle their impulses. So cognitive behavior therapy is an attempt to help with that as well. CBT therapy, on the other hand, it targets the choices, thoughts, attitudes, and meaning systems that are associated with antisocial behavior. Again, so when we talk about accountability doesn't just have to be punishment. Accountability can also be forcing people to really think about, again, look, you can talk about the system and you can talk about the white man, this and that. Let's look at your choices, the choices that you have made throughout your life, the attitudes that you have towards certain, institutions and certain people that have attempted to help you. Let's look at, your behavior within given institutions. You can't change none of the other things within your environment. So let's look more closely at your choices and what you can control and be empowered by that. And most studies have shown that these programs are slightly more effective in reducing recidivism. Again, that's our goal more than anything else.
That's what I figured.
First, we want to protect the public. Then, ideally, we want to make it that once these individuals have paid their debts to society, that they don't come back to these institutions anymore. Locked you up, we kept the public safe while you were getting better, and now we want to never see you ever again. There are also group programs, and group programs are exactly what they sound like. Whereas opposed to only working with a counselor or a therapist or some expert in the field, you also rely on some of your peers in terms of some of these therapy strategies as well. They've been shown to help inmates better control their emotions. Again, everybody's going to get angry. You're going to be challenged and pushed in the street and in society more generally. Oftentimes, the difference between being arrested or being in a situation where you may become a deviant and not, is just being able to control your emotions. This person may have said something a little untoward to you, Letitia. And again, there are certain levels of disrespect that, I know that we all have a line in the sand that we can't accept. But you can't be going out here trying to fight everybody. You have to learn to control your emotions. Otherwise you're going to get arrested for assault, and that's going to, harm your future. Now, it's okay for people to feel angry. So these therapy programs do allow you to, have space for that. But hopefully you can use it. You can find more constructive spaces in which you use your anger, your emotions. And solve your problems more creatively. Not through violence, not through substance abuse. They also help inmates deal with pressing legal concerns. Again, there's a lot of legal challenges, obviously that they're facing that they may not be familiar with how to try and work through. So these group programs can be helpful with that as well. And one of the things that these individuals often are lacking are just supportive relationships. That one of the things that we talked about, for example, and you probably heard in criminology if you've taken that, which I'm sure you have, are theories about how people become criminals. And one of the main theories is about your inner controls. And that speaks to the people in your life that kind of help, put some checks and balances on you. That you have people in your life that, care about you and that, rely on you. And you would let down your grandmother if you did this. You would let down your father if you ever did this. So just those relationships, and then people showing you, the socially acceptable ways of doing things. There are a lot of individuals who don't have those kind of networks, just positive people around them. That's really important. So these group programs also allow them to get some positive people around them that's going to encourage them to, stay on the straight and narrow instead of encouraging them, to do things that's going to have them end up back in jail. We'll talk about drug rehab. We'll start on Monday talking about rehab programs. There isn't much more to go, but I did want to spend some time before we break on the paper. And hopefully you all can see my screen. So the first thing, right, please, 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 for the love of Black Jesus, read the directions closely. The directions are there for a reason. They're your friend. So keep in mind, right, the paper must be no longer than 5 to 8 typewritten pages. It doesn't mean that you have to try and get it all the way up to 8. Just don't go over that. It needs to be double spaced. Please don't put extra space between the paragraphs. Make sure it's stapled. Well, you ain't got to staple it, obviously. But 1-inch margin, 12-point normal, Times New Roman font. The font should be universal throughout the essay. And again, like I said, you know, there is no page minimum. If you can answer all the questions in 1 page, go ahead and knock yourself out. Just don't go over 8 pages. Just don't go over 8 pages. Make sure, Latasia, your page numbers are included. And when I say it should include an introduction, several paragraphs outlining your arguments in the concluding paragraph, however you set that up, what you put in your introduction is up to you. I just say that just to try and have some kind of structure to it, Malik. Try and organize it in some ways. The organization, we'll talk a little bit more about the ways that you may see work more effectively. But I'm just looking for, you know, just some type of beginning, middle, and end to your paper. Your essay should include, though, it got to include, and please read all this carefully before you submit your paper. Go through your assignments and make sure you're doing all this. It should include a proper heading typed in the top left-hand corner. This should include your full name, the course, and the due date. And just to be clear, this over here is the top left-hand corner. When you sit on the screen, this is where your left hand is at, over here, top left-hand corner. Absolutely no quotes are allowed. Absolutely no quotes are allowed. And please don't plagiarize. Do not plagiarize. Most Allen students, most American students, period, are not very good at plagiarism. I'm going to catch you. You don't need to do that. If you plagiarize, you are going to earn a 0. If you plagiarize even 1 sentence, please write only in your own words. And try and write them in such a way, Latasia, like where you're teaching somebody else about the topic. Let's look more closely how your points are going to be broken down. You're going to be evaluated on how well you answer the questions, all of the questions, Malik, all of the questions. If you don't answer all of the questions, you can't possibly get all of the 5 points. The main source for this is our textbook. So you're going to need to provide support from the previous readers from this book. You can have a lot of really great information from every wonderful internet resource in the world. But if you don't have support from your text, you're not going to be able to get those 5 points. The clarity of your writing. So again, like I'm not going to like just butcher you about, grammar and typos, but please be, show some pride in your writing. If you know that you have some challenges in this, and it's not easy. If you know you have some challenges in this, please, reach out to the Writing Center. They can help you either virtually or in person. Do y'all hear me? And then again, as I said before, how well you put these concepts in your own words. Don't plagiarize. Write everything in your own words. You still got a little bit of time. The paper's due at 2 p.m. on April 26th. But if it's even 30 seconds late, you'll lose points. If you end up being a little bit late, Malik, still submit it anyway. The later it is, the more points you'll lose. The later it is, the more points you'll lose. But I'll accept them until the end of the semester. But we've had more than enough time, so it shouldn't be nobody's paper late, like for real, for real. All right, so let's look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so question. So if the paper is due April the 26th, right? How soon will we know our final grade for the class?
Whenever like I get done grading them, I'm usually not too long. It probably won't be that many days after. But even after that, even after that, we got a final exam. So like this isn't the last thing. Okay. So you can use your text. So looking at the questions themselves, and please make sure you read all of these closely several times before you submit your final paper. You can use your text, but mainly you'll need to refer to and cite outside research in answering the following questions. What are some of the traits of the average juvenile offender? Describe their age, their gender, their living environment, the typical violation. Are they murderers? Are they status offenders? Are they committing larceny? So what's the typical violation? What's the family structure? Is it a single parent household? Is it an extended family? Is it a nuclear family? What's their education level? Does the average juvenile offender have a college, have they graduated from high school? Have they graduated from 10th grade? Where are they at in their education? Don't just limit the traits you describe to what I have listed here, though. Tell me as much as possible, right? So in essence, Latasia, what we're doing, you're creating a profile. So there's you all have heard about criminal profiling and real criminal profiling, not just, okay, this person was Black. Like if there's a spate of serial killings that start in the area, the police are going to quickly form a profile of what they think the criminal might be. Okay, it might be a 48 average male. He probably got at least a master's degree. He seems to be married. He probably has a couple of kids. He seems to be a churchgoer, and he seems to be a sports fan. That there may be information and data that the police can collect to glean all that. Y'all ain't got to do all that. All this information is available to you through many, many, many sources. So this is a starting guide, Latasia. The more factual traits that you list, the more points you earn. Next, how do juvenile delinquents perform in school? What percentage of juvenile offenders eventually drop out of high school? Explain how these changes in the family in America over recent decades has affected the rate of juvenile delinquency. What do you all think that I mean there? The changes in family in America. What do you all think I mean by that question?
Like the new type of families we have, like you know how we have same-sex couples, and we have some parents who are doing other things with their bodies. Can't really be specific, but just
not as much that you can include that too, but not as much that. Do you recall we talked about with family structure? So family structure just speaks to like, are there two parents in a household? Or there are single parents in a household? There have been patterns in that regard over the last couple of decades. And hopefully you all will be at least casually aware of that you want to include as well. Abuse victims, I'm going to run out of time in a moment, so I want to cut to the chase here. But look at every question here are things that you want to include and speak to in your paper. There's an amazing amount of data on all of these topics. You also have at your disposal some really good people in the library that are grand researchers that can help you get access to this information as well. And like I said, there's a lot of information in this vein in your textbook. Before we get closed out, are there any questions about this so far?
No.
If any questions do come to mind, let me know. The paper is due on April 26th. The first thing you want to do is start to research as much as possible about juvenile delinquency. Who are the perpetrators? What are their backgrounds? And other statistical data that can inform the readers here. I'll see you all on Monday.